especially since we're starting the episode right now.
Oh man, we're doing a thing. We're back, baby.
We're back in, well, purple, blue, and black, I guess. Because those are the local colors I picked because I thought they looked nice.
Hey, whatever works.
Yeah, so it's the new year, new games. I believe we all ascertained a lot of games this holiday season.
I got a lot of them, and I don't think any of the ones I bought off of Amazon are newer than about 2003.
And this is fair, I guess.
I had to
I
get that Game Gear.
I
Ooh.
spent I spent the latter half of 2017 with a Switch and just going through the main games. So I did the Fire Emblem Warriors, I did the Mario Odyssey, I did I Am Setsuna for a bit, and then I got pissed because basically the game is garbage. At least to me it's
It
okay.
has problems, let's put it that way.
It's a good JRPG, but the combat system is just poorly handled. But whatever. Um, and then
And then there's the game
I,
we're talking about today, right, fellas?
yeah.
Oh,
Then
yeah.
then on the 1st of December, we were graced with the giftiest of all gifts going into the holiday season. It was the last big Nintendo release of 2017. It was Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Whoa.
A game
Yay.
a lot of people wanted,
Including
myself included.
myself. Oh.
We all did.
Except one of us doesn't have a Switch.
Rip.
And he has two thumbs and is poor. And it's
His
this
name's
guy.
Alberto. Yeah, that may be the case, but you have, you know, an
I play
idiot.
the game through you guys. I
That's
That's what we're
experience
here for.
yeah. You've got an idiot and a professional game programmer who can walk you through basically what it's like to play Xenoblade 2.
so
Side note, I'm also an idiot.
I was gonna say I know who the idiot is, but so who are the other two guys, including
Yeah. Oh man. So I guess I beat it, you know, just a few days ago, so it's fresher in my mind. So let me give you the whole scope. If you don't know, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the story of an idiotic man-child named Rex. He's like 12 or something. I don't know. They never specify his age. He's an idiot, and I hate him. He's an unlikable, irredeemable fuckwit. He's just a garbage character. He
Tell
is
us how
the
you really feel.
he is the blankest of slates of any JRPG like player character I have ever seen. He is just an optimistic little shit and he grates on my nerves. I cannot stand him. Everyone else you interact with throughout the entire course of the game has infinitely better fleshed out backstories, what drives them. There's interesting plot hooks regarding two of the main female characters. Like, even Tora and the whole weirdness of literally creating his own like wet dream maid robot
So hold up.
like makes sense.
Are you telling me Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is actually Zero starting life from zero?
Maybe, I don't know. Like, there's a major plot hole that is introduced. Like, so the game starts and you're like a salvaging kid. So like, Cloud Sea, all the same stuff that exists in the original Xenoblade Chronicles for the most part. Rather than being the two giant robots that fought and killed each other, the world mysteriously ended. There's Cloud Sea, and instead of the giant two robots that fought each other that turned into the Earth that you exist on, there are a bunch of Titans. And so you do things and you go off to a trade guild run by a very sleazy man, and he's like, "You're from this specific island, go help out these guys." And then you do, and you find the magic MacGuffin.
And you don't
Also,
find out why until 60 hours later why it was important.
that's very true. You don't know why he was important at all. And then it turns out, in a flashback, it completely invalidates the fact that he has the ability to access the magic MacGuffin. Cannot stress this enough. It is a major plot hole. He is not a native of Leftheria. He got there when he was 2 years old. He has no right, no capability whatsoever, does not deserve the ability to open up those doors to access the Aegis. The entire premise of the game is flawed. But it's a fun game and I love it.
I mean, you basically just describe Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles X in a nutshell. Their main characters were terrible, the plot made no sense, and despite it all, they were still fun.
But
Yeah.
at least they were feeling it.
That's only Xenoblade Chronicles. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is when Ardanian generic soldier man asks you in a poorly mask filtered Scottish voice if you can deal with it.
And
Repeatedly.
Repeatedly.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?
Rather not.
Excuse me, I'm dying. But don't.
Yeah.
I guess point being here, right? Story is serviceable, main character sucks. Eventually it finds its links to the first Xenoblade Chronicles game. But if you're playing it for the story, you're in the wrong spot. So we should probably get to the gameplay because I think we're going to be both happy and extremely irritated at the same time.
To just sum up the story, I will say that it functions more like a poorly thought out anime than it does a convincing story for a video game.
Pretty much.
If this was a 24, 26 episode anime, I would watch it and I would enjoy it, and it would probably be one of the top rated things that season because it's got interesting plot hooks tied to those two main female characters. Morag's story is highly compelling. The rise and fall of Amalthus through all the backdrops and flashbacks and everything about him becoming this like crazy power grabbing super pope. Like
So
that's all
what you're
super
telling me,
interesting.
RE0, starting life from 0. I'm gonna keep making this joke. I haven't
Well,
played the
no.
game, but there's a lot of parallels.
Kind of yes, kind of no. Like the story makes for a good 24, 26 episode anime. It still has its flaws, but it's enjoyable to a point. The cutscenes are worth watching. It's somewhat predictable. It's fairly tropey. The gameplay, on the other hand, is pretty great. It's what makes the game fun, like genuinely fun. There's so many different combinations of things you can do, and you're also blessed by the gift of RNG in-game loot boxes that can shape how your experience goes.
I don't have a follow up to this, unfortunately.
Oh,
I mean, I guess we can go into some details here because it's definitely worth covering how complicated a lot of this is. So, should we start battle system? Seems like kind of the core place to go first.
I feel like if we're gonna break down Xenoblade, we should first talk about the battle system, then the XP systems, and then finally just how the overall feel of the game is.
Works for me.
So if you want to take it away with battle systems.
I mean, I guess I'll start by comparing sort of the brief overhead and then comparing it against the first Xenoblade because the battle system is one of the things that in the transition from Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade X to 2 got quite a lot better with a few small changes. At its core, it's effectively a turn-based RPG, but it plays in real time. So you have real-time movement, but you've got, I guess it's kind of like a hybrid of Final Fantasy 10 and 12 from a high level. You've got real-time movement, you've got basic attacks that just happen, but you've got driver arts, which are effectively charge up, so they act as sort of your turn-based-esque element. You've got the blade arts, which charge up by using driver arts. So they are a second layer of sort of turn-based ish elements. You've got chain attacks, which are charged up by using driver arts, which are or charged up by using blade arts, which are charged up by using driver arts, which act as another turn-based element. So there's kind of a bunch of layers, and that complication there of things charging other things will be very indicative of other systems. But kind of the basics are very clean, very quick. You add layers, you add layers, you add layers, where it gets really complicated in a lot of depth. But a typical battle experience against something that's not just trash is um, for the most part, your party is going to be a healer, a tank, a DPS, something to that effect. I tended to play almost tank and 2 healer because it's a little bit cleaner, and the healers do pretty good damage anyway. But it's a lot of movement. You're going to be doing attacks that are directional focus, so things that get damage buffs for being from behind, things that get damage buffs for being from the side, those sort of things. And just a lot of kind of quick hitting like that, where you're focused on really just maximizing your damage while your AI guys might be tanking. You're going to throw some things that throw heal pots, and you're going to be running around getting heal pots to make sure your guys don't die. It's really just extremely fluid. There's always something to do because something has always charged up and it's ready to be used. And the big thing that really helped here relative to Xenoblade X is that they changed the input system on it. Xenoblade X, Xenoblade 1 had all your skills as a horizontal bar. You scrolled through them with the D-pad. It was kind of clunky. It kind of sucked. Xenoblade 2 puts everything on a hotkey. You've got blade switching on your D-pad. You've got driver arts on your face buttons. You've got blade arts on L and R. So everything has a hotkey. You don't have to scroll through anything. It's just really extremely quick. And out of everything that really changed between the previous Xenoblades and 2, that is the biggest and best change for the battle system.
Yeah. Overall, like, having played Xenoblade, granted I have done it on the 3DS copy, so I don't have the original Wii experience. So the controls are slightly different, but it seems sloppier in comparison to Xenoblade 2. You can, like, there are some benefits that you have, like in the original Xenoblade Chronicles, you can still attack while walking around and repositioning yourself. In Xenoblade Chronicles 2, that's not the case. You don't attack if you're moving, but it doesn't hold against you because there's always something to do while you're moving. If you're going for a health pot, if you're better repositioning to get the bonus damage off of a side attack or an attack from the back, there's always something that temporary loss of damage gets you in response. So it's a very, like, it's a self-rewarding system, even though it seems kind of awkward going from the Chronicle system of just attacking forever no matter what you do.
In a lot of ways, it also feels like a balance point because you can't just kind of carry things along with you, doing a little bit of damage here and there as you're backtracking and avoiding
Yeah,
all
you can't really,
attacks.
like, kite enemies and stuff like that. Like, the only way you could reliably kite an enemy is if you CC combo them with your blade arts, and that requires having your teammates, not just you, set up with both the correct blades to support getting a full combo, which is breaking their armor, knocking them down, launching them up into the air, and slam dunking them into the ground. And so there's like the blade art, the driver arts, and then the blade arts combos, and they all like stack on each other and reward each other for just working together. And the system blends really well and doesn't seem inherently punishing in any way. Like, if you're losing a fight, it's either because of a gigantic level disparity, or it's related to you got knocked into some bad terrain from CC combos or anything like that. It's not overwhelmingly punishing throughout most of the game. During the end of the game, they introduce like robotic enemies that basically spam knockdowns, and it's really freaking annoying, but that's the end of the game, and Weiss and I have our own problems with that.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
It's a whole laundry list of things, but by and large, the battle system feels incredibly rewarding.
I mean, if nothing else, the high level on the battle system is that I played an RPG for 80 hours and I wasn't avoiding combat, which is something that, as much as I like JRPGs, by the end of them, I usually just want to avoid combat. In Xenoblade, I was still actively seeking out combat because any sort of remotely challenging fight was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and part of looking for fight also ties into the XP systems, plural.
Oh
So
boy.
so to break it down, there's 5 XP systems, correct?
I'm gonna, while you're starting to talk about it, I'm gonna go look up because I wrote down how many there were.
Because there is XP for fighting, which you get just from doing battles. It goes directly once you end the fight. The experience for defeating whoever you defeated goes direct into your character level. The second is quest experience, which is primarily through side quests. You don't really get it. I think you also get it from completing main story chapters, and that requires you to rest at an inn to increase your level.
I also suspect that you get it from discovering a new location for the first time, because in the first Xenoblades, you got XP for doing that. And
I
in this
know
one,
it.
I always had rested XP, and I didn't know where it was coming from.
I know you can. I don't know if it's exactly just from reaching a new place. I know it's definitely happens from finding new landmarks and new places you can fast travel to. I don't know if it's
Yeah, I
just
think
in
it's anything
general.
that pops up like the big fancy title text.
Yeah. So any like new area location, and I think it's like early on it's like 25, but it scales up as the game scales up, so it's pretty well done. No, I'm wrong. There's like 7 XP systems. So
I'm
so there's
seeing,
active,
so
there's
there's, you
rested.
just had the two main XP. I'm seeing one, two, three, four, five. Um, technically seven with two questionables. I'll let you go through the rest and we can reconcile after that.
Yeah. So after the main XPs, which is just the straight level of the characters that you're playing with for Rex, Nia, Tora, Morag, and Zeke, which are your main 5 characters, there is weapon points, or WP, and that upgrades your driver arts. So, like, if you have double spin slash on your main character boy Rex, deals double damage from the side with weapon points that you also win at the end of the fight, depending, and goes directly to the blades that you were using. You can use that. Um, then there's SP, which I don't remember what it stands for. But that
Skill
is,
points,
I
maybe?
guess, probably since it's basically passive effects that are ascribed to the main 5 characters of your
Yeah.
cast. Then after that, there is affinity, which is the experience that goes to your blades. So every single blade has 5 levels of trust, and at each of those 5 levels, they get passive benefits that transform into something else. Usually, most of them relate to either passive skills, like most fire blades have fire mastery, so that'll allow you to like burn down physical objects, or it's something else for collecting. So, like, if you're at a collection point near a pond, you'll have ichthyology for fish, or if you're in a rocky area, you'll have mineralogy for digging up ores that you can use for a bunch of other things. And those are like the big 5.
And it's important to note here that trust is a resource that works on some affinity charts. Other affinity charts for some blades are either side quest based or mercenary level based, or you put a bunch of food in a waste bin based. So the affinity charts are one thing, the trust is another, and sometimes they
Yeah.
happen to work together.
The trust usually ties even on the blades who have like, put 7 pounds of food into a locker in a warehouse, that blade still has trust-based requirements in their affinity chart. And the trust, I guess, is arguably another form of XP, as is your overall like mercenary rankings.
Yeah, so there's five-ish of them. You've also got the robot stuff where you have to do the mini game to get the
Oh yeah.
resource to upgrade the robot. Um, you mentioned the Mercenary Guild, but the Mercenary Guild is its own thing. The Mercenary Guild has a level. You send your blades out on side quests. It becomes very important because blades going out on mercenary quests level up their affinity chart. It becomes the only real practical way to level up a lot of blades at once.
Yeah.
Um, then
What
the
happens is you start with your magic MacGuffin blade, the Aegis, and then you get like 2 or 3 more, and then you just find a bunch of core crystals, which are the in-game loot boxes that you turn into like a million other blades. And the only way to get them leveled up to get more benefits to do a lot of like crazy things in the world. There's so many different like direct like out in the world things that you can do with specific skill sets from blades. The only real way to reliably level them up once you hit like around fourth or fifth chapter is using those mercenary missions.
yeah, I mean, and then I guess the last two things I had listed as sort of asterisks under XP is that you have at least one blade that has multiple forms, so you have to level them up twice. And you have at least one driver that can also be a blade, so you have to level them up multiple times.
The thing with the driver who is also a blade, though, is that while they are in blade form, they are still gaining passive XP, which I wasn't entirely sure that they were, but I did find out after I turned them back for a period because I needed to have a full set of 5 people with blades to do certain things in the world, and was able to level them up 22 and a half. It was like 22 or 23 times. So they went from level 51 to like 73.
Yeah. But I guess point being, if that didn't make your head spin, you'd probably not be unhappy with this game.
Yeah. The saving grace of like this huge information dump though is that the game takes its time to explain literally everything to you. It spoon feeds you the information. And the tutorials for some of the stuff later in the game with like special mechanics tied to characters or whatever are kind of annoying, but that's because at that point you're so used to how the game flows and everything's been properly explained to you through the previous tutorials that you don't necessarily need them at that point.
I think the other thing that helps it a lot is that it's not like you're trying to independently earn each of these things. You get XP generically by doing things. You get WP and SP by killing things, where you also earn XP. You earn trust by finishing quests, in which you also earn XP. Your affinity chart goes up by killing shit and collecting shit, which happens anyway. So there is a lot of systems in place, but they
But they
just kind of
all
inherently all happen always.
yeah, they all overlap and intersect with each other, and then there's items you can equip on the drivers to modify how well you earn those points. Like there's an item that I have equipped on one of my characters that I had equipped for most of the later stages of the game once I got it, which is literally called Alphabet Course Plus, which just earns me extra weapon points every fight, which means that the overall damage I'm outputting in fights is higher because I'm able to level my driver arts. So like it all compounds on top of itself in a very organized system that seems like crazy out of place cacophonous way too busy at start.
I think this is one of the first spots where you really start seeing problems with the game, though. The UI is terrible, the menus are slow.
Menu management was one of the worst things. Like it's nice that fast travel is its own menu. You just hit X out in the open world and it'll pull up exactly where you are if you want to move just from place to place within the Titan that you're on in that specific area. If you don't, you have to back out, and then if you press B one too many times, it just pulls you out of it entirely. Like the menuing is just genuinely a mess.
I mean, figure that all that XP stuff we just described is in. They're all in different menus and in
But they're all
relation to
under
each other.
one branch of the
They're all
main.
under one branch, but in relation to each other, they're sometimes 2 or 3 layers deep in
Wildly
different
separate.
branches of this mega doom tree of menus. So it
Yep.
becomes a little unwieldy to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, and one of the big problems when it comes to like leveling up in the game that particularly bugged me a lot is anytime your blades unlock a new ability, the ability is not unlocked until you look at their affinity chart.
Oh, that's the worst thing in the entire game.
It is my second most hated piece of this game. Because there are certain points where you will go do a side quest or like a hunt mission for an affinity chart bonus because you need to have it for like a specific other side quest you're doing, or like you're just trying to fill out the affinity chart to get your blade to be overall stronger, and then you're like trying to work on the next one after that because you checked on what both of them were, and then you get the first one and you don't look at the affinity chart, and you're working on the second one and it doesn't always count because it requires that first one to be fully registered. So half of the time I was in menus, I was going through like at the end of every major side quest that I did, like relation to blade affinity quest or whatever, I had to go into the character menu every time and select. So like Rex shows up, or whoever you're playing as out of the 5 characters, you have to move one over because the character is auto selected, not the blades. You have to select the blade, you have to select their affinity chart menu, and then you have to basically just go through every single blade, which is, with 5 characters, 15 blades that you have to go through to get everything cleared before you can move on to do the next leveling thing. And it's just a horrendous menuing mess.
I mean, it really became a habit to the point where routinely every 10 minutes I was playing, I would go into the blade menu, go on the first blade, go into their affinity chart, and just spam R, ignoring what I was actually looking at until it stopped popping things up.
Pretty much. And then you also have to go through there's 5 different tabs for the characters themselves, because there's WP, there's SP, pouches, and
Accessories,
yeah, accessories. That's it. So
but
they have 5 different ones.
yeah,
Not
it
that
was a
those are
little crazy.
particularly difficult, because a lot of them was just like wait around and collect SP for forever. Because like for weapon points, you got an average of maybe 2 or 3 per fight. Is at least like what I was seeing uh, going into the late game. And what you need late game for leveling is you need like 4,000 to 10,000 depending on the level of the specific skill you want. So like that's fine. Skill points as well are just very slowly earned. And the later ones, like, so the early ones will cost like 250 to 500 at most, and the tier 3 ones cost like anywhere from 3,000 at the cheapest to 10,000 at the most. So
Yeah.
half the time, like, you'll be doing like going through the blades out of habit, but you forget to check on your actual characters, the drivers, and you just like were like, oh well, I guess I'm just overpowered now because I
Yeah.
forgot to look at everything, which isn't
Every now and
necessarily
then.
a bad thing, because even still, like, there are a lot of like challenging named enemies in every area of the map to fight if you do want to test your metal.
So, should we talk about the end game? Because I suspect we're both going to have negative things on that. I'm curious how close they are together.
Before we talk about the end game, we have to talk about chapter, I believe it's 7, right?
You're gonna have to refresh me a bit. I don't remember specific chapters where they ended up.
The chapter where you're in Indoline, which
Okay, yeah.
no, that's chapter 6.
Is it the one where they take away
Discussion.
Endaline without warning you, and then you lose all those quests because fuck you?
No, because those quests move over. Well, you lose the quests, but I did all the quests in that area first. So, but no, it is when you originally go to Leftheria for the first time, and they're like, "Oh yeah, come here, we'll do this thing," you know. Um, and basically, what it turns into is a Sonic 06 simulator. And I have to preface this especially because it's literally here's a cutscene. The cutscene ends. You walk down the stairs. You get another cutscene. That cutscene ends. You go to the docks. You watch that cutscene. It ends. You go back up to where you were 2 cutscenes ago at the very tippity top of the stairs on the other side of the level. And there's no like good fast travel option, so like you're better off just walking, and it just becomes a walking simulator of seeing like this scripted bullshit after scripted bullshit, and it just takes away any kind of player engagement for a better part of a chapter. And I understand that it's like setting up like the whole end game of everything with surprise the papacy is actually evil and in this game and so on and so forth, but what it does is it removes you so heavily from any kind of enjoyment in the game because the best part of the game is the battle system. And instead, it's just cutscene, walk here, cutscene, walk here, cutscene, walk here, cutscene, walk here. Do you want to do some salvaging maybe? Because you need to like rest at an inn before you can see the next cutscene? Sure, why not? Check it in. Okay, cool. Go rest at the inn because you're not going to move forward until that happens. Because resting at the inn triggers the next cutscene, and it drove me crazy. It removed me so far from the enjoyment of the game, and it just made every character in that specific area so incredibly unlikable.
And the problem really isn't that there were that at the length of cutscenes, it's that instead of being 5 2-minute cutscenes, it could have been a single 10-minute cutscene and it would have worked perfectly well.
It really could have, and I don't know if that's because of the Switch's limitations with like automatic sleep mode or anything because of lack of player engagement or something like that. I know during like there was a like 3-minute cutscene where I just set my controller down and at the end of it my screen had like darkened because of the lack of player input. So I don't know if like that was a risk at all, but there definitely should have been like some coding that you could have done like working with Nintendo to override that. So like yeah, you're watching, this 10-minute story unfold, but it's not taking you out of the game so much by having you go to a point, watch this thing happen, let it load the aftermath of what happened and go on and go on and go on just on this like needlessly repeating nonsense.
I mean, to be fair, they did end up by the end of the game, especially like right before the last boss and right after the last boss, they had really significantly long cutscenes where I don't remember that really being a problem. So it's weird in the few sections where they just had these like cutscene walk, cutscene walk, cutscene walk, and there were a few of them. Like why they thought that was a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean the final cutscene once you beat the game is, I believe, a 6.5 minute thing that happens. I ended up actively skipping some of the cutscenes going up to the final boss just because I didn't want anything to do with it. Like, the final boss is a giant freaking robot. I was like, okay, cool, I'm fighting a giant robot who's probably run amok. Turns out the main villain was inside it. I didn't even know until the mid battle cutscene showed up.
Sounds about
Because I
right.
skipped over the first one because I was like, this is probably going to take like 4 minutes of him monologuing, and I'm not about that life. This is the final boss.
It's about right.
Yeah. But like overall, the end zone is just it's a literal climb.
Oh boy, should I rant about this one for a few?
By all means, because like most of the stuff I'm gonna agree with.
All right, first problem, minor problem, but let's start with the minor problem before I really get pissed off at it. The entire last dungeon is a single vertical tower. It takes for fucking ever. And it doesn't take forever because it's long. It takes forever because it's an entire train of effectively uniquely named characters that technically aren't bosses but really are bosses that spawn a bunch of shit that just CC chains you. That is the entire way up the tower. It's CC chain boss, then another CC chain boss, then another CC chain boss. So if you aren't getting killed because you're CC chained, you're basically in long ass grindy fights. And that's like what, 2 hours it probably took me? Rough.
I stopped about a third of the way up that vertical climb and said, I'm going to go through and do every side quest I can that I haven't touched. And when I got back, basically the only things that were pulling to me instead of like everything, because I went from like level 55, which is like what it expects you to be around, to level 72 from all of the side quests.
Oh
And
yeah.
overall those side quests did not take a lot of time. I also spent time like exploring the rest of the maps in those areas, um doing some salvaging, like genuinely like trying to level up blades in the meantime, so it wasn't like I was inherently like throwing all of that time away. But in the end, like the only things that I were pulling were those named enemy mini bosses, as well as these. Oh god, they're like Gerald constructs or something like that. I know it begins with a G. It's like Gerald or something,
The
and they
like round alien UFO looking things.
not the round alien UFO looking things, though. Those are like annoying Beyblade monsters. It's the giant guy who like when you have to feed him drops two bikes,
Oh, yeah, and the bikes CC chain you.
and the bike CC chain you, and that was the most annoying thing. Oh, and then there's a named enemy, one of them like halfway through the vertical climb, and you have to fight like three at once unless you path
Oh
it
yeah.
properly, and it is just it's utterly brutal. And by the time I got to the last boss, like the last boss was a cakewalk compared to named enemies I was running into way up to him, and named enemies that I can go back to now that I've beaten the game and it's placed me the save before the final boss again. There's a level 130 named enemy that exists in the game. The final boss is like what, level 78 or something, and the
I
only
don't even know if
thing
he was that high. He might have been level 70.
Yeah, and the only thing that's seriously dangerous about him is the fact that once you get him to half health, he has a like basically kill all skill that doesn't stop unless you use a combo attack.
So let's talk about that. The first time I did the boss, it was super easy. I used a chain attack, and then he used his one shot mechanic that I didn't know about after I had used my chain attack. I died. The second time I fought the boss, it was super easy. I got out of a ad phase. He used a nuke attack that wasn't the one shot attack. I then had to use a resurrection, and then he immediately used his one hit thing, and I couldn't use a chain attack. I died. The third time, I did absolutely fuck all. I put tanking on everybody, and I literally put the controller down and let my guys auto attack him to death until he got to his one shot attack, where I then used the chain attack to win the game without doing anything. It was a gloriously bad final boss.
You told me about that one hit KO attack. So I went in with the team comp that I had, which boiled down to I could do nearly every blade combo under the sun. So I had a light character, I had a dark character, I had a fire character, a water character, a wind character, an ice character, an earth character. Yes.
So you stacked elements on him.
So I stacked three. No, I only put fire and water on him, and that dropped him to half health. Then I did the very shitty sneaky thing, which was to activate the ultimate form of Magic MacGuffin Aegis Blade. Because Magic MacGuffin Aegis Blade, her ultimate form, will take 1 level off of every orb in a chain attack.
And she is hilariously overpowered too.
She is the most bloated thing. So using her in chain attacks completely broke the game. Once I figured out that I could do it with her.
So
And
yeah,
so what I did is like it flashed the text for him doing that one hit KO attack. I immediately started the chain, got him down to I'd say maybe a fifth of his overall HP, and then did one more full blade art combo, which drops an element orb on him, and he died. And it took no effort at all. I had Morag as full tank, so it was tank blade, tank blade, tank blade. I had Zeke as 2 attack blades and 1 tank blade, and I had myself as a jack of all trades. So I had an attack blade with Mithra. Yeah, no, I had Electra at that point, I guess, equipped instead of Rock. Yeah, whatever. Not that it really matters. It's just element stacking. So I had Mithra, Nia, and Electra equipped, and basically like the only point where I was in a particularly bad scenario is after like I got him to quarter health. There's a cutscene. He shot a laser at my face, and I didn't realize it would do so much damage, so I had to swap and spam heal for like maybe 30 seconds before I was at full again, and then I just one cycled him.
pretty much. So yeah, that
He's
was
poorly designed because there's like no hints whatsoever that the moves he's going to do are going to deal that much damage. And granted, like it's a final boss, you should expect some kind of mechanic like that, but it comes frankly 100% out of left field.
yeah. The big thing for me, I in general, I hate one hit mechanics. I think it's a shitty way to design it. It's
It
it's almost
artificially
all
inflates.
right if one hit mechanics are preceded by an obvious phase change or an obvious tell or something like that. He literally has no phase chains. It's literally just he'll do some really shitty attacks. He has a big laser. Periodically, he'll spawn some ads. You kill the ads, rinse and repeat, and then you hit the magic barrier where he hits some health threshold, and then one shot mechanic. You better hope you have a chain attack ready. Oh, you didn't know you were supposed to save that.
Yeah. And then it brings you back to the beginning of the fight if you die.
Yep. So I guess that was the second thing that was annoying about the whole end game. The third and final one very nearly made me shelf the game. In between the really shitty climb all the way up the tower and the really shitty final boss, they take away everything. All of your party goes away, your important blades go away, you're left with your main character on his own and all of the shitty blades that you didn't know that you needed to level up throughout the game because you were doing something entirely different. Then you fight one-on-one fights where you're expected to play as a tank, even though you are not a tank, for the last 80 hours. Not
Pretty
very fun.
much. It's not fun at all. What I found out while doing this is I had a tank blade and an attack blade equipped that it gave me. So I had Electra as a tank and I had Rock as an attacker. On the first fight in those one-on-ones, I went ahead and I beat the living shit out of the enemy.
Same. First fight was pure just damage spam. You could get through it.
On the second one, I beat the living shit out of them. On the third one, I stalled them out. I literally just sat in the tank form and was like, will this end eventually? And the answer was it did, but it was way longer than it should have been for this mechanic that completely removes any sort of agency from you as a player.
Yep. And that was effectively how I got through it. I found a few tank blades that I happen to have. I scrounged up the right combination of food to really bullshit the mechanics. And I sat behind a shield that allowed me to heal. And then when the shield was up, I did a couple attacks until it came back, and I sat behind the shield and healed, and rinse and repeat, and voila, I won. It
Yeah.
was really dumb.
It's not a rewarding end game, but everything that leads up to it is genuinely fun, interesting, and exciting.
And it really is unfortunate because I think I finished at about 85 hours. I definitely didn't go as completion as you did, but for the first
I
80-ish hours of the 85, the game was phenomenally good.
Yeah, a lot of like conservatively, discounting the hours where it was literally just sitting running merc missions. I've put about 250 hours into Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And a lot of that was just I'm exploring, I'm searching, I'm crafting, I'm salvaging. I'm doing nothing related to the main quest. If I'm fighting an enemy, it's a named enemy or I'm doing it as part of a quest for like a blade or something. It was more I want to explore and experience the world as it presents itself than anything else, and that was fundamentally a more relaxing and more enjoyable experience, especially considering it left me a lot of time to literally just sit and enjoy the music.
Which, by the way, one of the best soundtracks from last year.
The Gormott area theme is also sort of, I guess, broadcasted as the main theme for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because that's like where the first major arc of the game happens, and you go back there constantly for a variety of reasons. Some for side quests, some for actual parts of the main quest storyline. It's relaxing and fun and also exciting. Like it hits every single note that it should. The backstory is presented typically without any like words or vocal whatsoever. It's literally just picture, like black and white, kind of grainy filter on it, and music, and it's composed incredibly well. The game is really good, but it has problems, and I don't think that should necessarily take away from the fact that we both enjoyed it.
I mean, if you can get 80 hours out of a game that has problems, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Like the game walks you through most of the systems early on anyways, and it's like, okay, yeah, sure, thanks. But like knowing that system because it's been a few years since I played Xenoblade Chronicles. I didn't get Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Wii U, so like I never experienced that, even though I know it is wildly different because you're fighting a robot half the time. Overall, like those tutorials make it so that Xenoblade Chronicles 2, even though it is part of the Xenoblade series and also as a whole the Xeno Saga series, which is another whole like huge backlog catalog of like very quality games, it is
With
a standalone.
problems.
Yeah, with problems. It is a standalone product that is ultimately enjoyable. Like if I had to give like a out of 10 rating, I would say 7.5, 8 at most, because those problems, especially during the end game, take a lot of your enjoyment out of everything that you've done up to that point. But otherwise, like the game is still very good.
I mean, if nothing else, the thing that I take out of it is that out of the sort of large variety of JRPGs I played last year, it's probably the one that I played the most. Most JRPGs, I kind of hit a point, 30, 40 hours in, and I just go like, I've kind of gotten enough out of this. The only ones that were really different than that last year were probably Final Fantasy 12 and Final Fantasy 15, both of which I finished and got a lot of hours out of. I think the common sort of connecting point out of the three of them is that, yeah, they all had problems, but they all did battles incredibly well. And that has to be what keeps you coming back into a JRPG.
Absolutely. Like the three big JRPGs I played last year was I finally got around to playing Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I played I Am Setsuna and I played Xenoblade Chronicles. And I Am Setsuna I dropped after about 20 hours. I put about 65 hours into Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and a lot of that was doing those side quests to unlock those better battle mechanics going into later in the game. And the same thing applies to Xenoblade. Like a lot of what I was waiting around for and like just exploring, that was all tied to getting a better experience going into battles, being able to, pick and choose specific blades that I had unlocking their affinity stuff, their quests and everything, and exploring them as people. Because honestly, and it's the weirdest thing, some Blades are more fleshed out than Rex is as a character.
And
Like
that's not an understatement. There's Blades that are phenomenally fleshed out from a full character arc perspective.
Mithra, like, and Pyrrha most of all, of course, is they're the magic MacGuffin Aegis sword. Praxis and Theory are two incredibly good missions. Herald as well is very compelling. I mean, there's a few others. Like most of the Poppy missions are pretty good. So like the amount of time that they took to like properly flesh out these things that you're going to be interacting with constantly is really well done. It's just a shame that your main character is a piece of cardboard with optimism written on it in Sharpie like 75 times.
Which is the
Pretty
next
much.
Nintendo game, by the way.
Yo,
Yeah,
I'm
but
gonna
that's
play Cardboard Robot like you wouldn't believe.
as far as I can tell. Speaking of Cardboard Robot, it is for all intents and purposes what I can see, like based off of the trailer and based off of like what it's going for. It looks like Project Giant Robot, the canceled project for the Wii U, and seeing that come back because it was literally just a hey, what if you were a robot with motion controls thing. It's like really cool.
Anyway, I think that's enough of me being angry at the end of Xenoblade. Go play it. It's fun. Buy a Switch. There's good games. The end.
Yeah, pretty much. Get a Switch if you don't have one. Fire Emblem Warriors is great. Mario Odyssey exists forever as like the gold standard. As the secondary gold standard, you have Breath of the Wild, and there's Champion's Ballad is out now, and I think there's one more DLC coming. Or
Nah, that was the last one. The next big DLC for Nintendo that's been announced is going to be the Xenoblade Story DLC.
yeah, you're right. Wow.
I get
Yeah,
it, guys. I'll get a Switch here in the next year or so.
it's
Dude,
okay.
Jeez.
Birdo, it's time.
Jeez, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's like a bunch of indie games too. Like there's Light Fingers, there's Fee, Wander Song,
Normal Heroes 3 coming soon, trademark.
No More Heroes 3, Mulaka. I don't know if Donut County is coming out for the Switch, but I really hope it does because
I
that's just
think it is. I vaguely remember it being in a trailer, but I might be confusing it with one of the E3 pressers.
possibly E3 just kind of blurs into one thing of like, man, I wish I had more money.
Wikipedia says Windows, OS X, iOS, and PS4, which sounds distinctly not like Switch, but who knows?
Yeah, there's always the future.
Remember that Devolver conference, Wise? You and I
Oh
were just
God!
you and I were
Don't
just like,
remind me.
what?
The Devolver conference was great. It was the most Adult Swim parody nonsense of E3 ever.
It is bad.
I couldn't help but laugh, and no. I remember Weiss, and I think it was damn it, who was it? Who was just like, what the hell is this? I stayed up this late for this.
I mean, to be fair, I would have been awake anyway, but I might as well complain about it.
That's fair. Because we complain about the things we love here at Video Game Rambles.
That's what we're here for.
And that's why we ramble. Question mark? Question mark.
Healthy discussion.
And you know what else is a healthy discussion? Feta cheese on pizza. But that's just a theory, a game theory. Thank you guys for listening to Video Game Rambles. I am Alberto. Join me with me is Merle and Weiss. And good night, everybody.
Take care.
So long, folks.